Theseus and the Minotaur. But Theseus had not done with bulls, and his last fight was the most terrible of all. The bull of Marathon, you remember, had been brought from Crete by Heracles, and he left a son behind him in Crete, who was half bull and half man, named the Minotaur, which means the bull of Minos, king of Crete. Minos made a pet of this bull, as he had done with the sire, and he had a wonderful house built for it. There was a very clever man living in Crete named Daedalus, an architect and an inventor, who could make houses and statues and all sorts of machines such as people had then. In fact, they say his statues could even walk. Daedalus built a house for the Minotaur, which was called the Labyrinth. It was a maze full of winding passages, like the maze of Hampton Court, only more mazy still, and all of stone. The paths led to a cave in the middle where the Minotaur slept. But most horrible of all, this monster was fed with the flesh of men who were turned into the labyrinth. Once in, they soon lost their way and kept wandering about, but the Minotaur knew all the ways, and it gave him sport to hunt them until he caught them, and killed them, and ate them up. Now Minos had a quarrel with the city of Athens because his son had been killed there, perhaps by accident, perhaps not. This son had been victorious in the Athenian games, and had gone afterwards to tackle the bull at Marathon, which came from Crete, as you remember, and the bull had killed him. At least, that was one story. But Minos made war on King Aegeus in consequence, and forced him to pay a tribute every year, but not a tribute of money. He was forced to send to Minos every 7 years young men and 7 young maidens, whom Minos turned into the labyrinth for the Minotaur to eat. This was more bitter for Aegeus than all his other fears and anxieties. The time was now come for the tribute to be paid, and lots were to be cast for the young men and maidens. Then Theseus spoke out boldly. "Father, it is a shameful thing to send those boys and girls to be cruelly killed by a monster. Let me go with them, and I will kill the beast." All were astonished. Aegeus was dismayed, but Theseus stuck to it. Go he would. Never would he put up with this cruel tribute. And like a true leader of men, he would never command one of his subjects to do anything which he was not ready to do himself. So the lots were cast for the others, and they went down in a sad procession to the place where the ship lay that was to take them to Crete. Minos was on board the ship himself. Now the ship bore a black sail, in token of mourning, and King Aegeus, on parting, gave Theseus a white sail, with the words, "My son, if God makes you able to destroy the monster, put up this white sail on your return, that I may see it far away on the water, and know that my son is safe." This Theseus promised to do. The ship set sail. A fair breeze from the north blew it over the waters. On board were Theseus and the other victims, unarmed and helpless, for such was the will of Minos, and Minos himself looked at them, gloating with joy. He even put out his hand and rudely stroked the cheeks of one of the maidens, who cried out, "Help me, Theseus." Then Theseus rolled his dark eyes in anger and said, "Son of Zeus, that is not lawful. You have dropped the rudder of your mind. Hold back your violent hand. God's destiny rules all, and what he has decreed, the scales of justice shall weigh out for us. That fate we shall fulfill when it comes. Until then, hold your harsh purpose. If Zeus was your father, I am akin to Poseidon, and indeed I may call him father. And the nymphs of the sea gave my mother a golden veil at her wedding. Therefore control yourself, for I would not care to see the light of day if you should do violence to one of this company. Before that, we two will come to a trial of strength, and destiny shall decide between us." The sailors were amazed to hear these bold words. Minos had no will to try his strength with the invincible wrestler, but he thought of a new plan and cried out, "Zeus, my father, give me a sign with thy lightning. And you, if you are akin to Poseidon the earth-shaker, dive down to his abode, and bring me back this ring that glistens on my hand. Now, you shall see if the Lord of Thunder hears my prayer." At these words the lightning flashed, and Minos threw the ring into the sea and said, "Look now at that clear sign of Zeus. Into the sea with you, and Poseidon will give you fame over all the earth." Theseus was not afraid. He stood up on the stern and dived down into the sea out of sight. The steersman would have brought up the ship to wait him, but Minos would not allow it. He called out, "Keep her before the wind," in hope that if Theseus did come up again, he might be left behind to drown. Little did he know the counsel of the gods. So the ship sped on before the wind, and the young Athenians shuddered and wept at their coming fate and the loss of their champion. But the champion was quite safe. As soon as he dived beneath the surface, a pair of dolphins caught him up, one under each arm, and carried him down and down through the water, clear as crystal, with a delicate tinge of green, among the shoals of fishes, which stared at them with great round eyes, through the seaweed, to a coral cave where the daughters of the sea used to dwell. Their radiant forms shone with splendor like fire through soft transparent robes, like silvery muslin, and golden bands were round their heads. They were all dancing gracefully in the coral cave. There he saw the queen of the sea, Amphitrite, who threw about him a purple robe, and set a wreath of dark red roses upon his head. She said, "Why have you come, my boy?" Theseus answered, "To fetch the ring of King Minos, who has just thrown it into the sea." The nymphs had ceased dancing when he came in, and now one of them glided up. They do not need to walk. They can glide up or down or all along, whenever they will, as swift as tunny fish. And she held out the ring to Theseus, saying, "Here it is, I caught it as he threw." They delayed him no longer. The dolphins took him back, between them, far swifter than a ship, and brought him up on the ship's quarter, where he appeared to the amazement of the whole company, and the secret wrath of Minos. And most wonderful of all, when he emerged from the sea, he stood once more on the deck to return his ring to Minos. Theseus was quite dry. See what wonders the gods can do. Now they came to the Cretan haven, and now the great procession marched up from the haven to the city, with the 14 young men and maidens in their midst, sad and mournful, but the city was full of rejoicing, for there was a feast to celebrate this tribute and this sacrifice to the terrible Minotaur. The whole road, 3 miles long, was thronged with people in gay clothes, shouting and waving their hands, as you can see today in the pictures they made themselves. And the women looked out of the upper windows of the houses, with bare necks and shoulders after their country fashion, and with tight bodices and flounces on their skirts. Amongst them was Ariadne, daughter of King Minos, who with her friends sat on an upper balcony of the king's palace. "Look," she said, "there are the victims. Poor things, how sad they look. But who is that marching at the head of them? He is not sad like the rest. He is proud and brave, and holds up his head." One of the ladies in waiting said, "Why, that's the young son of the king of Athens. And what do you think they say? He was not taken by lot. He came of his own free will, and says he will fight with the monster." "Brave boy," said Ariadne. "It is a shame he should die." And she fell silent, and let the others talk. For the instant she saw Theseus, love struck her heart, and she determined to help him. But what could she do? If he killed the monster, he would never get out of the labyrinth, and would he kill him? How could he, without a weapon? You see, she did not know the story of Theseus, as you do, or how good he was at wrestling. At last she went to Daedalus, the architect of the labyrinth, and asked him how she could help the young prince to find his way out of the labyrinth. Daedalus was very much afraid to meddle, but he was an Athenian himself, and wished well to Theseus. At last he thought of something that could not easily be found out, and he said, "Madam, all that I can do is this. Take this ball of thread and convey it to him. Tell him to tie one end to the post of the door, and to unroll it as he goes. Then, if he succeeds in killing the monster, he can roll it up as he comes out, and nobody will ever know how he managed." Ariadne thanked Daedalus, and that night she sent her old nurse with the ball of thread tied in a corner of her dress. Some say she sent also a sword, but I do not think she did that, although we often see it in the pictures of Theseus. It would be difficult for an old woman to hide a sword, and if she were searched, she would be suspected of some mischief. But who would suspect a ball of thread? The old woman managed somehow to see Theseus. She gave him a ball of thread and the message, and added, "The princess says that she loves you, and prays you to take her away with you, if you win the fight." "That I will indeed," said Theseus, and they parted. The procession of youths and maidens came to the labyrinth. The gates were opened, and they were let in. Then the gates were shut. There they stood, helpless and hopeless, for they knew nothing of the ball of thread, and they did not really believe that Theseus would win. But Theseus said, "Be of good cheer, my friends, God is with us. Did you not see me come out of the water? And now this place is full of winding ways, and no one who gets in can ever find his way out. So you must stay here, and not stir one step from the gates. Leave the rest to me." So saying, he drew out the ball of thread from his breast, and tied one end of it to the doorpost. Then he moved away into the dark paths, unrolling the thread as he went. The others were all attention, for here was something new, which they did not understand. But it made them hope once more, for hope is always there. Prometheus did well to put blind hope in our hearts, a more precious thing than knowledge. So Theseus moved cautiously on, coming now to a blank wall, now to a place with many turnings, and although he tried to keep his direction toward the middle, as true as he could, yet before long he really did not know which way he was going. Well was the place called the Maze. It was enough to maze anyone. But at last he came to an open space, where he saw a black cave, and on the floor of the cave lay the monster, like a strong giant with the head of a bull and bull's horns. Up leaped the monster and let out a great roar, and rushed at Theseus. What happened then I do not know, for I was not there, and no one was there to see. Nor did Theseus tell tales about it afterwards, for he was no boaster, as some of the heroes were. Some of his pictures showed him holding a sword, but as I said before, I do not think he had one, for all the captives were unarmed, and the old nurse brought him none. I am sure that he used all the art of wrestling and boxing, which he knew so well, and that God put strength into his limbs, as he so often does when the weaker man defends the right. It was of no use for Theseus to strike at the bull's head or neck, as he would have done with a man, so he must have struck at the heart, or the mark, or used the wrestler's trippings and grapplings. In the end the monster was killed. But there was no time to rest. Theseus offered a prayer of thankfulness, and once more picked up the ball of thread. Then he went back by the way he had come, a long roundabout, winding up the thread as he went, for he wished to leave no trace to make Minos think that someone had helped him. And you may imagine the joy of his friends when they saw him return, bruised and covered with blood, but victorious over the horrible monster. How they got out, I do not know. Perhaps the guards had left the door unlocked, because they never expected anyone to come out alive. Perhaps, as I think, the old nurse was there waiting, for you may be sure Ariadne was waiting somewhere. But get out they did. It was night, the city was asleep, and the prisoners crept down the long road to the harbor. Somewhere they met Ariadne, wrapped up so that no one could tell who she was. Quietly they climbed into their ship, quietly they hoisted the sail, and before anyone was awake in the morning, the ship was sailing away far over the seas. I need not tell you of Ariadne's joy, or of the love of Theseus for her kind heart. They were happy together, and when they came to a pleasant island next day, they landed there and stayed there quite a long time. And they might have lived happily ever after, but it so happened that the goddess Artemis killed her. I do not know why, but Artemis was a hard and cruel goddess, and easily offended. They do say that the god Dionysus then raised her to heaven as his wife, and placed among the stars the crown he gave her at his marriage. Others say that Theseus deserted her, but there are always those who will say unkind things. I think myself he was a noble and true gentleman, and it does not seem like him to desert the girl who saved him. At least what happened next shows that he was very much hurt by her loss. His mind was so troubled that he forgot his promise to his old father. He forgot to put up the white sail to show that he was safe, and the ship came sailing home with the old black sail hoisted. Every day King Aegeus would climb the Acropolis hill, which stands in the middle of Athens, and sit there watching the distant sea for his son's ship. He sat on that projecting rock which you can see in front of the great gate. There is a beautiful little temple built on it now, the Temple of Wingless Victory, as if the people meant that Victory sat on her hill, and could never fly away. There sat Aegeus, and there one morning he spied a sail. The sun shone upon it, and he could not tell for a long time what color the sail was, but as the ship drew nearer he saw it was black. The old man's heart broke, and he fell down from the rock and died. The sea is still called the Aegean Sea, after King Aegeus, and some believe that he threw himself into the sea. But the sea is some distance from the rocky hill, and I think I have told you the true story. So the people did not go down to the sea to meet the ship, for they thought it all was lost. But when Theseus and the young men and maidens came out, and the news ran to their parents, then there was rejoicing and feasting. Only Theseus was sad, for his old father was dead,